Hello, I'm Oscar, and in this video, I'll be comparing the GPU versus the CPU and the differences between them. But first, what is a CPU? A CPU, otherwise known as the Central Processing Unit, is often called the brains of the computer because it performs the necessary calculations in order for the operating system and the applications for the computer to execute properly. And first, inside of our CPU, we have our ALU, otherwise known as the Arithmetic Logic Unit. These handle basic math operations such as multiply, add, divide, etc., as well as our logic operations like NAND or, and I don't know why I start with NAND, but yeah. Then we have our control unit, which basically acts as the orchestra of our CPU. It fetches instructions, decodes them, tells the other parts what to do. It's basically like the brain of the brain. So then we have the cache, which is just a small, very small, extremely fast pool of memory that's located very, very close to the chips. It's basically like if we need to get information from DRAM, the dynamic random access memory, it's located like super far in order, and if we want to get information from that, we need to go all the way to DRAM, get it, come back. But with the cache, we can just go get it, come back, store it in the cache, and if we need to access that again, we can just get it from the cache, which is a lot closer, so it takes less time to do. And with modern CPUs, a lot of them have multiple cores. And like you're probably asking me, what is a core? A core is just like a CPU within a CPU, which is kind of like redundant, but that's basically what it is. You, it has everything all the same. So a modern CPU will usually have like 8, 16, or even more packed onto a single chip. But But with multiple cores, the CPU is able to do several things simultaneously, and they all share the same DRAM. And the CPU, you have to remember that it is optimized for sequential work. So everything's located very close to each other. That's why memory is super close, so it can get that like super fast. And yeah, we then have our GPU, which you can see is made up of all of the same things. You have this green, which is also the ALU, lots of ALUs because it's made for heavy computation. You then have our orange thing, which is also our uh, control unit, which unlike the CPU, it's much more bare bones. It doesn't do as much. And our cache, and which is much smaller this time, as opposed to the cache that we had in um, our CPU. And this GPU in the name, graphic processing unit, was originally built to render images on display screens, but now it's used to do multiple, like many things that we will talk about in the future. GPUs are designed for high throughput. They can handle massive amount of work in parallel. Since a GPU does have like tens of thousands of cores, it can do all the stuff at the same time, tens of thousands of things at the same time. However, you have to remember each core is much more simple than the CPU. So, yeah, which brings me on to matrix multiplication as an example. For matrix multiplication, in order to calculate C or the product of matrix A and the product of the product of matrix A and B, we need to go through each element of C, C1, C2, C3, and calculate the uh, product of uh, row A and column B, as in the picture presented. So what we need to do is we need to multiply A1 with B1, and then add that with B A2, B4, etc. And you can see how work intensive that is. Now, C1, C2, C3, they're all independent of each other. Calculating it is independent, so this is perfect for GPUs. For a GPU, we can just give the responsibility uh, of each element to a core or a thread. So maybe core one can calculate C1, and core two will calculate C2, core n will calculate Cn plus one, etc. Stuff like that. However, with a CPU, much you can't do that. In a single source CPU, it'll have to do everything all in sequential order. Calculate C1, then calculate C2, then calculate C3. Multi-core CPUs such as the four-core CPU that we saw earlier, it would be calculate C1 to 4, then C5 to 8, then C9, stuff like that. And that is way slower than just doing, you know, calculating them all at the same time. And if you don't really understand that very well, I have a better analogy, which is suppose we have like a bunch of like your normal chefs on the left side, right? They're not anything special that will represent our GPU. We have a giant team of normal chefs. And to represent our CPU side, we have amazing, amazing chefs, highly regarded for their work, very good at cooking fast and good. We have stuff like Gordon Ramsay, Swedish Chef, Chef from Chefs, and the Bear. They will represent our four core CPU or CPU, whatever, doesn't matter. And like the Matrix, let's say that they need to cook something like 500 egg tarts, for example, right? For the GPU or for the chefs on the left side, the team of chefs, we could just get each chef to cook like 20 something egg tarts, right? All at the same time. Like, so each of them will only have to do 20 egg tarts, and if they have more, it could just be one egg tart. But yeah, as for our CPU side, the chefs on the right side, there's only four of them. Each of them will have to cook something like 125 egg tarts each, which is much, much slower. And although they're much faster at cooking and much faster cooking are objectively better cooks than each individual chef on the left, there's no way they're cooking 120, egg tarts faster than 20 egg tarts for each chef on the left side. There's no way. And for the use of graphic and for the real life, what the GPU is primarily used for is for like graphics, as in the name. Each pixel on the screen needs to be calculated independently of each other, which is perfect because they all need to be done at the same time. And and each calculation is done independently of each other. For AI, same thing. You know, for AI, in order for AI to manage millions of matrix multiplications have to be performed in order for that to do, which is highly parallel, which is beautifully done by the GPU. And finally, financial simulations, which is also surprisingly highly parallel. There's just millions of calculations that needs to be done independently of each other, and you can see like the pattern, stuff that does not depend on each other, stuff that does not uh really stuff that does not depend on each other, stuff that needs high computation is perfect for the graphics GPU. And so why don't you say, so why are you asking, oh, Oscar, why can't you just have a bunch of high-powered CPUs onto a GPU or have a CPU have lots of cores? And the reason that's why is because of Amdahl's law. You can only parallelize so much until it becomes just sequential. Like most of a CPU's job is just mostly sequential, and with like several more. cores, it's not going to make it any faster because you can only divide things up so much until you can't, and then you just have to execute things from A to B. Thank you for listening in to my crazy rant, and goodbye.